Hello. How are you doing? I am punchy. It's Friday afternoon, and I've made this video like 3 times, and I can't get the results to like happen the same time over and over again. So I'm abandoning my script, and I'm going to something else completely different. But bear with me. I'm punchy. I'm in a good mood. I'm getting stuff done. So here's the question: how do we talk about this in scholarship? So we're looking for um, the tools where we're gathering data. That might be, you could express it as an instrument or a questionnaire or a survey. Things like that I think would be really good, especially if it's like qualitative or even quantitative with a Likert scale. So I think we're good with that one. But here was the trick: how do we get it from the perspective of a client? And I was just like, oh, I'm really going to struggle with that. And all day today, I've been working with comm students on analysis of rhetoric and argument, and we came up with a methodology. I don't know if I would call it a methodology. I'd call it more of like dropping something in the kitchen and calling it a recipe. But if you go to Google, you could do something that I call a contextual search. And I kind of threw one together. And let me show you. I'm showing you my method so you can repeat it with more rational keywords as you go. One thing is sometimes instruments, especially if they're very successful in psychology or other practice, sometimes they proprietarily keep them. So you have to pay money to use the instrument. Do you remember the Myers-Briggs thing? I think that's been kind of devalidated. But Myers-Briggs, you used to have to pay like $35 to get a Myers-Briggs test. And essentially it was just like graph paper, and they helped you score and figured out if you were a judger. I'm totally judgy. And I was sad when it turned out that it's not valid. Be that as it may, some of these might be protected. So hopefully we can find some that aren't, and we'll see like full text examples of them. So when I do a search, everything before the colon is the context. So I could do like survey, I could do questionnaire, I could do instrument. I started with instrument just for lack of anything else to think of at the time. So what Google, you have billions of search results, right? So the context, when I first put something before a colon, is like, I only want to find stuff that is one of the major ideas of it is an instrument. So it's probably like in the title or some other ranking in the Google algorithm. Everything after the colon is the search keywords that are going to search under the context. So I didn't know what to say. I'm like, client perspective, therapist, and I accidentally stumbled across some good stuff. So the meta-analysis I'll go back to. I was, I was laughing at this one and another one. What's it? What is a therapist's client called? And if my daughter were here, she's 13. She'd say, a client. But how do we get the voice of the client? It seems like client therapist with a hyphen in between is the way to go. Oh, and I struggled with that. Like that, sometimes the hyphen would disappear, and it was just chaos. So your results may vary, and I apologize, but this is a good. It seemed like a good starting point in the databases, especially. Um, so when you go into this, I didn't necessarily read the whole thing, but I found a great quote that gave us synonyms for it. So client therapist perspectives, and I think if it works like an order of operations in math, where we want the client to be the most important thing, otherwise it would be therapist client, right? And in here, we found the following great quote. We had the client therapist working alliance, which is a thing, but you can also call it a therapeutic alliance or another synonym or another synonym. And I was like, oh, this is good. Because what it does is it includes the voice of the client in the therapy, intervention, outcomes, what have you. And so I got client therapist working alliance. And if you look on Google, there's some good stuff. But I wanted to start going in and like, how do I find stuff in the library catalog? And how do I find stuff related to what you were looking for? So I'm going back to the catalog there. But I did client therapist working alliance, and it was just total, just nothing. I was so frustrated. Sometimes it was like 0 results. And I thought, okay, maybe the working alliance is the troublesome bit. So maybe it's just client therapist and surveyor instrument or questionnaire. This is this is the third time I've made this video. If I get nothing on this one, I'm going to call it a week. So do you see what I'm doing here? This would be an advanced search where one search bar would be client therapist. That's my first concept. And then the second line is I'm putting in these synonyms for an instrument, so survey or instrument or questionnaire. So it's going to go look for client therapist first, return everything, and then out of those search results, it's going to look for those other words. I swear if this doesn't work. Yeah. It worked this time. I wonder if it was like holding cookies of like older searches that I'd done and it was like messing it up. I don't know. So, the thing that I would encourage you to look at and to pour through and see if you can find these things, which I think there's a lot of. Because you work with a client, we're constantly assessing those moments with like, hey, how you doing today? That's an assessment. Where the client says, oh, I'm feeling good. Oh, okay, that's an assessment. But is there like a formal instrument? This is what I'm hoping to help you find. Now there's like it's awkwardly slow. Hey, look at that. Self-assessment modes questionnaire. Sometimes it shows up really obvious. Sometimes you have to dig for it. Oh, here we go. Helping Alliance questionnaire. Remember one of those synonyms was Helping Alliance? What do you do to get a hold of these things? You could pour through all of these, but you could also go through, I would say, book chapters or books, and they might have the more canonical, can I use that word? The more established and solid tools and instruments of a particular industry. It's looking up books. I don't want to look up the word books. And so these books, these might have the instruments, these might have like the texts that you're looking for. And therapy and assessment. That's one place to look. Book chapters is another one. Did you see that in there? So back to that original catalog search, you could go in and you could look up book chapters. Is it going to let me before it finishes loading? This seems more promising than the books because there's a lot of clinically specific books. So it's in a particular population. It's a particular intervention. Oh yeah, it's music therapy. How do you assess music therapy? Client therapist system. This one might be better. And books are typically a little more formal and they're going to give you a lot more of the evidence that you're looking for. Having said that, oftentimes in scholarship, they're going to be presenting new instruments that they want people to consider. How do we look at that? Well, let's go to our favorite database for assessment of counseling and stuff like that. Psychology. PsycInfo. Going to psychology. So it could be that there's too many and not too few. It's just the way that we search for it. So this is where your criteria comes in. Is the instrument valid enough? Is it new enough? Is it applicable? Is it going to work for you? This is something that you would have to determine. But if we just put that search in, so client therapist, and then we're survey instrument or questionnaire, and we're only looking in psychology, scholarship. Now this is like where the video falls apart. If it does, I'm going to be like, it's okay. This is where people, they might talk about an instrument or they might not really show you in the appendix. So this, I would say the catalog seems to be becoming better than this. Oh, there's a relationship inventory. There's an instrument right there. It's a whole book on that. By the way, if you run across something that you don't have access to, like a chapter in a book or a book that this it seems like. This one's from 1986. This might be out of date. You can get it through Interlibrary Loan, which is on the library main page, or you can just email me and I'll buy the book for you if it's published in this current century and we can actually get it. Let me know how your search goes. Oh, by the way, if you go to Google and you do that same search that I did, there's a lot of stuff out there too, where people are. There's like Social Work of Buffalo. There's like clinics working on these things, so they might cite it, and you can go back into the scholarship. But let me know how it goes. I think this was a pretty successful search, but I'm not quite sure what you're looking for, so I'm happy to help further. And a happy weekend to you.